Okay, we're going to give you Roberta Beary today. She edited the last Haibun only issue of Failed Haiku that's up now. Underneath this video, you'll have a link to it, so you can take a look at the Haibun that she selected for this issue. It's outstanding. She has done this twice before, and you can find those on the archives page on Failed Haiku, so you'll find plenty of work that she has selected. But we wanted to talk today about the ways a poet can improve their chances of publication of a Haibun. Roberta, as well as doing Failed Haiku, she's been kind enough to do it for 3 times now. Also is the editor at Modern Haiku, the Haibun editor. And she's judged numerous contests. And so I wanted to give her a chance to comment on her experience as an editor and to give people hints, both on the things to avoid and the things you should try to include. So, Roberta?
Thanks, Mike. I really enjoyed my third go-round as guest editor of a Haibun-only issue, A Failed Haiku. I wanted to talk a little bit about what made things work, Haibun that I selected, and what didn't work for me. So with the caveat that this is just it's very subjective. It's just me, Roberta Beary, the editor. So it doesn't really apply to other editors, except for some stuff I'll talk about up front. The main one being, please read the submission guidelines before you submit work. A whole bunch of people, I guess, think they know Failed Haiku very well, and they don't need to read the monthly submission guidelines, which is not a good idea, because a lot of times the guidelines, well, a certain part is set in stone, like it's a senru journal, as opposed to haiku. Other things are not set in stone. So, for example, I had a lot of people send senru in to address to Mike or Brian and or Kelly. And that when you're doing a Haibun only issue, that just adds to the work. So I finally did a kind of a template response saying this senru-based Haibun only issue, please read the guidelines, and with a link. Some people took that as an invitation to submit Haibun, which was fine, but those same people submitted more than 2, which showed they hadn't read the guidelines carefully, because there was a limit of 2. Some people submitted 3 Haibun, some people submitted 5 Haibun. And when I wrote back and said, you're limited to 2, they asked me to pick the 2 I like the best. That's not the editor's job. So they got a response saying, you can resubmit this one time with 2 Haibun. And, most of them did that. I didn't think the burden should be on the editor to make that decision as to what constitutes.
They don't realize that you have to read them in order to make a choice on the top 2. And the whole thing is, if you're doing a journal like this, you're getting hundreds of submissions. That's a lot of work. So I would tell you this: I always read. I know you do too. I always read submission guidelines, even if I know them by heart. Modern Haiku has not changed their submission guidelines dramatically in I don't know how many years. And that's good, by the way. I don't have any problem with the fact that they didn't. But I still read them. So that's a good idea, Mike, because we did make a change recently for the Haibun submissions to Modern Haiku, which is if you have been in, you are now limited to once a year. The issues come out 3 times a year, and because we want to promote diversity of submitters and not be reading the same people all the time and publishing the same people, which we don't anyway, but I just thought it would be nice to mix things up a bit and
make it even harder for people to get it. Send, so they do change, not very often. You're right about that. But yeah, it behooves all of us to pay close attention to the guidelines, no matter if we are friends with the editor or have never met the editor or know the journal inside out or have never read the journal or anything in between. So that was the first kind of thing that surprised me, that actually some poets whom I know quite well didn't bother to read the guidelines, the submission guidelines. Second thing I wanted to point out is I did limit it to picking one Haibun, which I don't think that was in the guidelines, but that was a personal choice I made. I only picked one Haibun out of the two, where I picked no Haibun. And then I had a bunch of emails. Now, these things that I'm talking about coming up are things that I have never done as a submitter. When work of mine is accepted, I am grateful to the editor. I don't look to make the editor's work increase. So I was quite surprised to get a number of emails back asking me why I hadn't taken both Haibun. I did, once again, have to do a standard template saying that for me, for this particular issue that I was guest editing, I was limiting my acceptances to just one Haibun. This went to all sorts of places. Some people said, thank you, I'm happy that I'm going to be in the next issue. Some people wanted to know why I didn't pick the other Haibun. And some people asked me for pointers on the other Haibun, like editing tips. So when you're getting, hundreds of submissions, and you're lucky enough to get selected out of all those hundreds, it's probably not a good idea to ask the editor for edits of a work that's especially not included.
But by the way, this is advice that not only works if you're submitting to Roberta Beary, but to me or to Kelly or to Brian. It is when you're getting any editor. I mean, it's a volunteer position. We don't get paid. We do it out of our love for the form, and we love Haibun. But Haibun are the hardest thing to judge as an editor because you have to read a lot. It's not 17 syllables that I'm maxed out at. I can sometimes have 2 pages to read in one Haibun. So this isn't stuff that just applies to Roberta. Believe me, we can't reply and tell people, give people pointers. If I did that 100 times, we'd never get an issue.
200 times or 300 times. One exchange I had was I had a question about the title. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a typo. And I got a rather interesting exchange from this submitter, whom I won't name, but I can say it was a he. And he wrote me back about all of the effort that he put into his Haibun, into both of his Haibun, right? Maybe just this particular one that I had asked about. And it wasn't when you get a question like that, that means that the editor is strongly considering your work. It doesn't mean mount a defense in terms of, we're not in a courthouse and you don't need to defend your work to me. If I'm asking you something like, did you mean this or did you mean that? That means I'm focused on your work, and that's a good sign. But he wrote me this very impassioned response about putting his heart and soul into the work, and I can't remember what else, but I was very tempted to write back, all of us put our heart and soul into the work. I put my heart and soul into the work. But I'm just saying that as an interesting aside, which is if you get a further question or one question from the editor, don't take umbrage. Be happy and respond, in a succinct and to the point manner. So, and that piece, it's one of my favorite Haibun, and it's in the issue 72, the Haibun only issue. Another thing, I noticed I got to the point where I would read the senru first after being defeated too many times by the title drawing me in, the prose drawing me in, and then the senru, if it came at the end, either not being a being a haiku instead of a senru, or being a sentence, or being a recapitulation of the gist of the Haibun. Mike Rehling has plenty of stuff on his Failed Haiku webpage about what's the difference between a haiku and a senru. And he does say it's a, it's a personal decision, but I can tell you, if there's no human element in it or something, an emotion that resonates with us as people, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a senru. So
you're not alone. I don't.
And I mean, some of them were on the fence. I could have gone either way, and those were extra work for me. But I did want to give the submitter the benefit of a careful read, and in most cases, I accepted. If I was already thinking it was a very good quality Haibun, I did accept those. And some of them, you'll get a good sense by reading the issue of the variety, not only of the Haibun style, but also of the senru style. So that was another thing I considered. And I am not going to engage with somebody at this point and say, you wrote a haiku instead of a senru, and that's why you didn't make it. I mean, some people did ask me for comments, and I kind of spoke generally if I had the time, but mostly I pointed them to my 2 craft articles on Haibun because I was I was up against a very strict deadline, and there just so happened that I had the time to devote to this issue. This issue did take a lot of time, but I was happy to do it, and I was glad I had the time. The thing about senru is you have to be very careful that you don't stray into 2 categories. One is you're just repeating the prose in a different way, or the end poem, the capping poem, or the beginning poem. And another is that you do focus on the human element. You can have, nature references in there, that's fine. But if it's something, that one of the great Japanese masters of the 15th or 16th, 17th century could have written about nature, then it's probably not going to work for failed haiku.
By the way,
this kind of an issue.
I get poems all the time because we accept previously published work. And so people will say, well, but it was in modern haiku. I've got no beef with modern haiku. Any of the editors, by the way. I was perfectly content that they know what they're doing, but they don't make a differentiation. So yes, you wrote a beautiful haiku, and I understand why they accepted it and featured it, but I'm a senru. That's what our thing is. That's what our journal is about. But I get it all the time. And like you, I don't always tell people. Sometimes I will say, they'll send me 10 wonderful haiku, and they know what they're doing. And I would, if I was Paul Miller, I'd be sitting around saying, wow, I'm going to put 3 of these in, but there's a problem. I'm here for senru. So I will gently say, hey, a lot of haiku.
You're nice, Mike.
Take a look at the pages, and we do have a lot of information on
it. The other thing about senru is that fiction writers, especially, who are pretty well seasoned fiction writers, have a pretty good sense of what makes good prose, and some of them, new to the form, don't really understand what a senru is, or a haiku is, or what the place in the Haibun is of that short poem, the senru in this case. So for those people new to the forum, you're not doing yourself any favor by attaching a list of your publication credits. That I hardly read those because, again, I'm just focusing on the work. Also, please read prior issues of the journal of Failed Haiku. You'll see a great variety of what's being published in the journal, but more importantly, it'll give you a good sense of what's accepted. It's fairly easy to tell people who haven't read prior issues or are not familiar with exactly the zeitgeist of Failed Haiku is, according to the creator, Mike Rehling. So once you get so many submissions, it's disheartening to read the ones that are so good that they almost make it, except for the senru. And that's why finally I started reading those first, because if the senru doesn't make it, that to me, I did write to one person who asked, I said the fatal flaw was the senru, and she said, thank you for your, I don't think she said ruthlessness, but it was something along those lines.
And by the way, this can happen to anyone, even the most experienced poets. I won't get into it, but with a name everybody would recognize. And they sent me 10 poems, and clearly there was some sort of a formatting error. I mean, it was gibberish on the page. And they just had slapped in a thing, click send, and it happens to all of us. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, this is an icon, and I'm writing back saying, is there something I'm missing here? What
was the answer?
He was very apologetic. He said, oh my God, I can't believe I clicked send on that. But
it's a test.
it happens to all of us. So you should be looking at what's been published is very good. And you also can learn. There's not a lot of difference between me and Roberta Beary in terms of what we will accept as in a Haibun. She's one of my teachers, so I will be honest with you. I steal her style sometimes. If she tries something, I try it. See, if Roberta got away with it and got it published, I figure I should do. So I think that's a more important.
WWRD, what would Roberta do? Or WWR, right?
You got it. Not
the other thing with a more serious subject is do not send me any sexist, homophobic, racist, violence-themed or violence-laced Haibun. I was surprised at the number of submissions I received. Anything, I mean, even if I get one, I would have been surprised, but I got a few, somewhere between maybe 5, and I'm not sure that it went as high as 10, but even 1 is too many. And I was just rather appalled because that's never happened to me before. I can't say never. I think on 1, 2, or 3 occasions in the 8 or 9 years I've been Haibun editor at Modern Haiku, I think I've seen also a handful there for Haibun. But these people know who they are, and you are not doing yourself any favor at all. I mean, some publications would ban people from further submissions. I've seen that happen with editor friends of mine at other journals, but I think at this point it would be a good idea for Mike to say a few words about the subject, and because some journals do have these blanket statements on, and I did check, and Failed Haiku does not. but I'll leave that to Mike.
No, I have deliberately not included it, and it's a very that kind of a thing in the submission guidelines. Not because I'm condoning it, because I'm never going to publish it. It is never going to make it to do that. The difficult topics, yes, the overtly sexual and the overtly political too. We didn't get into that. Going nuts on a topic, that's great. But boy, you better think 3 times before you submit things like that, because it doesn't have the appeal. And the journal, I think Charlie Trumbull is the one who said it for me one time at an HSA meeting many years ago. And he said, an editor is a stand-in for the readers that you're trying to attract. I'm not trying to attract that kind of reader. So, and I can tell you that Brian and Kelly aren't either. So I've handled it. I don't ban people. I think I discourage that particular type. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see homophobia. I don't want to see violence against women. I don't want to see violence against anyone. I don't want to see
including pets,
animals.
Right.
I don't want it, and I don't think it appeals. So anyway, I've ranted. But if you maybe it's up to Kelly and Brian, but if they want to put it into the guides, I wouldn't object. But I'm never going to publish that stuff.
Right.
And that's just the way it's going to be forever. So.
I did get some political Haibun. It's hard to say if they were verging on rants or not, because they are a big turnoff for me. So whoever is tuning in right now, if I'm the editor, I very rarely take political themed Haibun. I think things like that, maybe, long after the fact. I'd certainly be interested in reading something about, if you were at the somewhere with Abby Hoffman in the 60s demonstration. Yeah, that would appeal to me. But a recent protest rally, not so much. Which brings me to another point. Most of the Haibun that I accepted, if they at all seemed more like a memoir type, these were things that happened a while ago, not in the recent past. And I think, I'm not saying don't write about that, but for those things, for good writing, good Haibun, high quality Haibun, I think the long-term perspective and looking back at events, important events that are universal. So as Mike was talking about, quoting Charlie Trumbull, appeal to the reader, the reader that the editor is the stand-in, for whom the editor is the stand-in. A lot of the Haibun submissions, you could tell that there's an emotional connection with the writer about the subject, but it was so recent. COVID is a very hard one to write well about. I think I might have taken a couple, I can't remember specifically, but first of all, there's been a plethora of things about COVID. We're almost saturated with COVID-themed work. And plus, it's still going on. I mean, here in Ireland, there are new restrictions just kicked in last night. It just, something about the flu epidemic, the influenza epidemic of, World War I era, that to me would make an interesting Haibun with, Senru themed. Think about something like that. COVID, it's so close to us. I mean, I have a few friends who have passed away due to COVID. to, either complications of COVID or just not getting, they didn't have the vaccine or the vaccines hadn't been manufactured yet or whatever. I mean, it's a very emotionally difficult subject. And I think more time, at least for this editor, is needed for quality Haibun on that subject. I have written some myself, and one or two have been published, but I forced myself to distance myself from the subject matter when I was writing it.
I think there's a good hint. It's the situation you can deal with. You don't need to say COVID-19. You don't need you don't need to say pardon me, Trump or Clinton. I don't care.
Right.
Take the situation, make it more universal, and people in Ireland will not understand our silly politics in America. Nor do I understand the politics.
Believe me, they follow it avidly.
I know they do. But they don't always get the nuances of what you're fussing over. And I think that's a good point. But the general theme of it is, I write a lot about the 60s. A lot of my Haibuns, published and unpublished, come from that 60s, 70s, and 80s period when my wife and I were doing all kinds of things. But that still has relevance today. It still means the same thing.
And it resonates. It resonates today. And the one, the two Haibun I have published about COVID, I don't believe either of them mentioned that word. So it's just, it's a good, for those who want extra homework, it's a good task to set for yourself to try and write an effective Haibun without mentioning the word COVID and see where it gets accepted. I'd like now to talk about the work that was accepted, just say a little bit about it. I was looking for, first of all, quality writing, all three aspects of the Haibun, the title, the senru in this case, and the prose, all linked together. They all work. The senru was of such high quality it could stand alone, by which I mean be published on its own as a senru, without looking back at the prose for it to make sense. And in other words, I did get quite a few submissions where the title was okay, the prose was very good, and the senru was kind of so-so. So that becomes a judgment call with the editor. And my way of evaluating those senru was, would I see this in a journal just on its own? Would it make the cut? And in some cases it would have made the cut, and in some cases it wouldn't have made the cut. This is, the world according to Roberta Beary as editor. I mean, other editors might feel differently. The other thing is that there were certain things I just was not interested in, and there was a lot of memory pieces, from childhood. Those are good, even young adulthood, whatever, even something that happened recently. But something has to happen in your Haibun. It can't just be a recounting of, I picked up my wife early from work today because she had a couple of hours free, and we went to the forest and we found a clearing, and I had brought a picnic lunch, and we sat down and we ate it, and we saw a squirrel, and then the senru. Nothing really happens there as far as I'm concerned. What's missing is some element of which will evoke an emotional response with the reader. Now, sometimes I use this example of the picnic or the trip to grandma's house, and then the big bad wolf is waiting there instead of grandma. And you don't have to go that drastic, but something that the reader is not expecting. That's what I look for. Mike Rehling did a very innovative piece, which if you look, it's on the cover of this issue 72, and then it appears on the first page also without the image. Mike called it a haibunga. I finally got the pronunciation right. And it's called Waking Grendel. And I just, that, as soon as I read it, I knew this was going to be a piece, and this was going to be the piece that gives the reader an idea of what the rest of the journal is going to look like.
Well, thank you. That was big. I love it. And anytime, by the way, if Roberta wants to turn down my submission entirely, that's fine with me too. But she's not an easy get, so I never assume. But that particular one, and I've told you this, so I'll share it with everyone, actually was not a very good first draft. In fact, it sucked. And I have 3 in the 40, HSA has the 40 under 40 program, and they assign supposedly older and wiser.
Oh, you're a mentor.
Yes. So one of my so-called students, who, by the way, has been published in Modern Haiku and Acorn and other places, she's a phenomenal poet. And what I do with them is I let them critique my work first, my fresh work that hasn't been anywhere. And they get to beat up my first thoughts. Well, she took this Haibun. She loves Haibun. She is a super fan. And the title came from working with her. She didn't like my title at all. Threw it out. She worked on the prose and helped me hone it. Now, I wrote it, but she was telling me what she didn't like, and I was responding in real time. We went back and forth, and we got to the senru at the end, and she helped me pare that out. It's amazing what when you share with others how much you get. And we talked about this Towpath, your group in DC, and Evergreen Haiku, by the way, which I love. Michelle Root Bernstein's. She's
your group.
She's my high school, my haiku teacher. And I write daily with Kelly Savage, and we do a lot of collaborations together and stuff. She is phenomenal. And Brian Rickert and Ben Ga, who people don't realize that Ben and Brian live near each other and get together at least once a month and critique each other's work. Both of them are outstanding poets. But you need other people. And that's the substitute for people who say, ask the editor to tell them what's wrong. Sometimes your writing buddy, your haiku.
I agree.
That's the best one.
That brings me to another point. It's very good to be in a writing group, or even just one other poet get together, on FaceTime or on Skype, or if they live close to you, face to face. I've done that, for, 25 years or so. But one thing as an editor, which I do not appreciate, and I might have mentioned before, is if I give you feedback on something, do not tell me what your writing group says. We're not in a negotiation here where you get to bring out witnesses and tell me, well, my writing group said, or so-and-so, and please do not name whoever said it in your writing group, because I don't want my judgment of their work to now be clouded by your spilling the beans here. It's, if you want to say a general statement, my writing group says such and such. I had some cases, not this time, but where people have come back to me, accepted my edits, and said, oh, after that, I checked with my writing group and they liked my version better. And I'm going to take back the changes and go with my original version. Well, I don't want to be like Mr. or Ms. or Mix mean, but You can take your version and submit it somewhere else. Then there's plenty of people standing in line behind you that are not getting this attention on their pieces.
After it's been published, after I've published it, they come and say, "I want to change it, and please change it." And I go, "If I change it, it will be to remove it because you completely soured me on your poem with this change." And that's the other thing. Don't be shy about liking your work or going to bat for it in the sense that you resubmit it elsewhere. But I never argue with a editor about their choices because it's their choice and there's my choice. And I can say, "Hey, that's a really great one. Why don't you submit that to Modern Haiku? I'm sure Roberta will love that one." And they submit it and boom, go nowhere. Well, doesn't mean I'm wrong. Doesn't mean Roberta's wrong.
Right. I mean, it's all subjective. For editors are humans, and it's a subjective point of view. But that didn't happen this time. But I just thought I would mention that because some people did come close to putting in things about their writing group. It's great to have a writing group, but it's not going to get you any extra points with me to tell me anything about what your writing group says, because I also have my writing group. And I wouldn't dream of saying to an editor, "But my, so-and-so in my writing group doesn't agree with you." I also don't bring things to my writing group, editors' comments. I don't say, "Well, so-and-so thought this part should be changed to that." That's a personal thing between me and the editor. If I'm writing to you something about your piece that you submitted to Failed Haiku, that doesn't mean go make everything public, even to your writing group. Back to what's good about the issue. Yeah. Mike's definitely look at what Mike did on the cover, and it's a very innovative piece. And I love work that's innovative. I love where people stretch their imaginations. They tackle things that are completely new. You can't think of, has this been done before? I mean, Mike Rehling linked to Beowulf in his Haibun, which I got right off the bat, and I love that. I love many layered meanings and interpretations. The title, Waking Grendel, could link to Beowulf. It could be somebody else named Grendel, a person named Grendel, just that kind of thing. There are a couple of pieces. I don't want to talk about specific acceptances, but there are quite a few pieces in this issue that are highly innovative, either in the structure and the form, the topic, how they placed the senru, what they used for a title. I mean, all sorts of different things. And that's why I really encourage people to experiment with the Haibun form, because it's kind of like a very trending thing right now. And I think because a lot of MFA programs, at least in the States, are using them in their teaching materials and their curriculum. And I'm seeing a lot of things from students, from also previously published, well-published, highly published lyric poets who are new to the form. Which brings me to another thing. If you have never written a Haibun, don't let that stop you from submitting. We had several acceptances for people who had never written a Haibun before. And the only way I knew that was because they wrote to me and said, this was my first try. And I read such and such, and I did research on, I read the back issues, and I read these articles, and I've read other Haibun, and I wasn't sure I got it right. And I'm so happy with the acceptance. I mean, editors love to hear that kind of, those emails. Well, and I'm sure Mike's also accepted several people who had never worked the form before.
I think the most important thing to an editor, any editor, I don't care who you are, everyone has it. Susan, Anton, everybody has it. The best thing in the world is when somebody says, "This is my first publication," and you go, and I don't judge it that way. I don't really care. If you tell me it's the first and I read it and it's good, it's good. I don't care. But a lot of people, they don't say it. They give you a straight.
Right. They don't say it. Yeah.
Then they get an answer back and you say, "I've accepted this." And they go, "Wow." You know what? That was the same way with me. That as an editor, that's why we're here, is not to just have the same people submit every month, but to find new people every month. And that's a big part of it. And I think, I can't tell you, that's a thrill for me, just like it is for you, Roberta.
And I do, not to plug my own work, but I do recommend reading this issue, because this is the third time in the last few years that I have guest edited a Haibun only issue. And I think this one is the best of the three. I love doing this issue. I'm really proud of the work that's in it. And for those people who did not have work selected, it's not, most of them, it was just, it's a judgment call on the part of the editor. And there's always, with Failed Haiku, there's always an opportunity to send more work in. I did write to people and say, who asked me to just keep on submitting. And, this is not a reflection on the quality of your work in most cases. Sometimes it turned out I had accepted already a plethora of similarly themed Haibun for this issue. And I didn't want, this is about the last days. I've written so many poems about my mother's last days on this earth, so many Haibun. And I don't know if people had read them, and that's why I got so many. But editors do look at least this editor looks at what's been accepted and looks for diversity of themes and topics. So it could have been that this was a fantastic Haibun, perfect senru, great title, but I've already taken a whole bunch of, not quite the same one, but close enough in theme. And that's why, just keep submitting.
Yeah. I've said that many times. That's one of the things that sometimes it's just if you got 19 bad breakup senru and maybe that it's a good one, but I'm going to take the ones where you're playing with your kids, or the
right.
The foibles of cooking dinner or something, rather than the 20th bad breakup poem.
Yeah, and as a writer, before I started editing, I was not really aware of that. And so for the people who are not editors, remember, it could have nothing to do, the not being selected could have nothing to do with the quality of your work. And it could just be by reading the issues, you'll see that, they've already had a bunch like on this subject. I mean, I was very surprised. There was one that came close, but it was about writing. Now, Haibun about writing, as far as I'm concerned, I did take one or two, but most of the people who are interested in the process of writing are writers. Writers are interested in reading about the process of writing. Writers like reading Haibun about writing. I'm not sure if people who don't write are that interested. And so that's why there's not going to be a third of the Haibun in the issue that I guest editor are not going to be about writing. I can tell you right off the bat. First of all, it's hard to make that subject new and innovative because so many people have written about it. So the ones that I did accept, to me, there was something unusual, something very, highly innovative and something that would catch the reader's eye and also resonate with not just the reader who's a writer, but the reader who's not a writer, which there are people that do read these journals that are not writers. And sometimes even editors forget that, but it does behoove us to remember that not everybody who reads these journals is also a writer. We actually like the pool to be expanded to as many people as possible.
Two things that I would tell you, just since we're on this topic, you broached it. In Haibun, and we'll see if Roberta agrees with me. In Haibun, there is an element of fiction that enters into it. It can be pure. Everything doesn't have to be you're pouring your heart out about your particular event. It can be something that, and I'm not sure some of my memories are not 50% fiction. To be candid with you, I'm truthful.
You didn't meet somebody you didn't experience Beowulf in today's time?
Someday, if you've got an hour, I can explain my Beowulf obsession. But the thing is that so there's that element that's in there. So you have a lot of flexibility in creating an experience. You're creating an experience. You're not creating something trying to be factual in every line about what happened to you. You have to.
I do agree with you, Mike. And my way of looking at that is to say, is it an authentic experience?
Right.
Now, it doesn't need, by authenticity, I don't mean factually accurate. I mean, was there an emotion that is there an emotion, an authentic emotion that you are trying to express that others can identify with, that can be within the parameters of this experience, whether fictionalized or memoir or whatever. I mean, to me, the thing that must be credible is the emotional resonance, and how the writer goes about creating that. That's up to the writer. So I don't ask people, did this actually happen? Which I have some editors, I'm not going to name names, but I've actually gotten emails from people saying, I can't imagine this happened to you, and I'm not going to accept it for that reason. Or please, before I accept it, I need to know when this happened, what year it happened, and all these other questions. I mean, I'm just as happy those people don't take my work, even though some of them are close friends of mine. We just do have a different view of what Haibun is. Right. And everybody can have their own view, but I'm not going to give up my work to make it into something that is in line with your worldview if I don't agree with your worldview of what a Haibun is. By you, I mean the universal unnamed editor.
Well, the other thing, and you sort of touched on it, but people read these journals, particularly the Haibun. Haibun is a thing now. I'm not sure why it caught on suddenly. I'm glad. But there are people who consider themselves writers. They don't consider themselves poets, even. Although I won't name people because then somebody will argue with me about it. But there are some people who write novels or novellas, and I think they're writing. It's a poetic form of prose. The more people are reading it and taking it seriously, and it's a way to introduce them to haiku and senryu. And
true,
and they see it for some reason. The prose element of it attracts them in a way that these short little poems don't, and they start to see the connection between what you're trying to say in the poem. The less than 17 syllables can be an expansion of 2 paragraphs. Amazing. And that we're slowly but surely, haiku, senryu, Japanese forms in English, are starting to get accepted by the
It's
real.
true, yes.
Old.
And I've been lucky enough to have a couple of Haibun accepted in non-haiku journals, which I like because it spreads the Haibun word and the haiku word to other places. It's great to have journals like Failed Haiku and Modern Haiku and Acorn and Mayfly and Presence and Blithe Spirit and Frog Pond and all the other good.
We had a minor technical glitch there, and it was my fault, but we didn't lose anything, so we're going to continue. But we were talking about authenticity and how you when you're telling your story in particularly in the prose portion, but throughout, it doesn't. You're trying to share the experience. It's the same idea, I think, Roberta, that we have in haiku and senryu itself, by itself.
I agree. And you'll see, for those people who do a close read of this issue, you'll see some haibun that you can tell right off the bat are veering into fiction or science fiction,
right.
Dystopian elements. I try to accept as many what I term authentic haibun as possible, by which I mean those haibun that resonate with the reader. The reader will read the haibun and say, I can relate to that, or that reminds me of something that happened to me, or sometimes I feel like that too, even though I've never traveled to a different planet, or I've never met an alien, or whatever the situation is, or I grew up in one of those rare happy families, but there's something about your experience. I'm reading in this haibun, the author, that reminds me of some other thing that happened with my spouse, or, the universal feeling and an emotional resonance, innovative writing that draws the reader in, the haibun that you want to read, not just once or twice, but 5 or 10 times. Those are all things I was looking for in editing in this issue. And it was also a great sense of freedom that Mike gave me because of it being a haibun only issue. That's another thing I loved about it, because from all my years of editing, being the editor of Haibun at Modern Haiku, that is a haiku journal. That is primarily a haiku journal, and the haibun are limited. So this was like, getting the keys to the kingdom for 1 month. And I just had a blast. I mean, for everybody who submitted, if you got in or you didn't get in, it was a pleasure to read your work. And I'd kind of like to end on that note. Keep writing, keep submitting, be as innovative as possible, and keep submitting to Failed Haiku, because it is a really fantastic journal. And spread the word out, forward those emails that Mike sends with the links to the issue to as many people as possible, the non-writers in your family as well. I think they'll enjoy it. The ones in my family certainly enjoy it.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to have you anytime. So you've been a great friend and a great friend of Failed Haiku. And I think that you've inspired a lot of people and taught a lot of people about haibun over the years. And I can refer people to the Haiku Society of America has a haibun contest. You judged, I think, in 2012, the last time.
Yes, I've judged a couple of haibun contests. Haiku Society of America. There's a whole bunch now. Just contact your favorite search engine, and sometimes I do say not quite right for Modern Haiku, or I didn't in this case say for Failed Haiku because I didn't want to speak for Mike, but some of the ones that didn't get in would be great entries to a haibun contest.
Right.
And always think that if you're interested in entering contests, think about Haibun contests, because there's a whole bunch of them now. I just read Cattails Journal, which is an online journal, just has the results of its latest Haibun contest, was judged by Lou Watts, who's a very good Haibun writer, and he's got one in this issue. And even just reading the comments of the judges sometimes gives you insight into it. But anyway, enter contests, send your work out to places, send your Haibun out. Don't be discouraged. Keep on keeping on.
I will put some links to other Haibun journals. I'm not immune to that. I submit to them myself, and to some of the contests and contest results, so you can look at them underneath this video. But thank you, Roberta. Thank you so much. And I appreciate it.
Take care, everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.